Hey everyone, in this video we're gonna model a stylized Viking house. So at the beginning we're gonna delete the default cube and then create a new one with Shift A again. Now in the bottom left we can change the size and I want to go with a size of 4 meters. Next we can swap into the edit mode and then we can move the whole cube up on the Z axis of exactly 2 meters so it's kind of sitting flat on the ground. We can select now the top face, and if you press G and then Z, we can move that -3 down, so we have now the walls are 1 meter high. Then we can delete the bottom face because no one is going to see that, and the top one we're gonna inset a little bit. Then we can also delete the top face and we can create 2 loop cuts at the front that are gonna make out the door. If you have one loop cut selected and you press in Ctrl E and then F, you can make it align to one side so you can get 2 straight lines. In face select mode, then we can select a loop off the front and remove them all. You might want to have the door frame a little bit wider, so you can select just the 2 sides on the left and then move them over a little bit further, so G and then X. Next we're going to create a cube, another one in object mode, and this time we're going to go of a size F2, and here in edit mode we're going to follow the same procedure, so we're going to move it up for 1 unit this time on the Z axis, and then we can scale it on the X and Y axis, so we can press S and then Shift Z, and I'm going to go here with values of 0.2 for X and Y, and in top view you can grab it and put it on the right spot. Now here I also scaled it a little bit more thinner, and then we can swap back into top view with 7 and press Shift D to duplicate it and then X to just move it along the X axis, and we have another wooden one for the other side. Now with Ctrl R we can add some loop cuts so we can give both of them a little bit of variation and make them look more stylized. If you're selecting one of the loops, so you can select the loop with Alt and then you can move them along by pressing G twice, and now it's just a little bit of rotating, scaling them, and just to make them look, more stylized. So you just want to get a little bit of variation so they're not completely straight here. The last thing I want to add for those is a small bevel for the edges. So by holding Shift, I'm going to select all the edges, and then we can use Ctrl B to bevel the edges so they're a little bit rounded off. If you now hover with the mouse over one of them and press L, you can select it and then you can duplicate it again with Shift D. In front view, we can now rotate the duplicate for 90 degrees and then do grab to move it up and then also scale it up on the X-axis. With Alt, we can now select that one loop cut in the middle of the door and move it up with G and then Z to create that door frame. Back into object mode and entering edit mode for the actual house again, we can now here also select those edges and then do a bevel the same way we did with the wooden parts. Now we're going to create the walls. So what we're going to do is select all the inner edges and then extrude them up. So in front view we can now scale them on the X-axis so we get that kind of small slope for the roof. Back into edit mode for the wooden parts, we can now align them more with the walls, so especially the top one here, and moved a little bit around to make it align more, and then also added a loop cut on the right side. Once more in edit mode for the walls, we can select the top part again and extrude it upwards on the Z axis and then scale it again on the X axis. We're not going to scale it completely together, but quite close, so we just have a small gap there. Then we're going to add on the right side and on the left side some loop cuts that are kind of about on the same width to kind of close up the roof. And then to close up the roof, we can select 2 opposite edges and then press F to create a face. Now here, especially in the front part, we have a little bit of a problem because we have too many edges, but we can select 2 vertices and then press Alt M and merge them or get them together, and then as soon as we have just 4 more edges we can select 2 and create a face. Same here in the front. Here we're just gonna have a triangle face, but that's alright, that won't bother us while rendering. It's always a good idea to also rename your objects, especially if you create more of that. And then we're going to select the wooden parts, and in edit mode we're going to duplicate one of them and we're going to separate one of them. So this is now a complete new object, a separated one. and here into edit mode we can move it aside, and this is going to be one of the side wooden planks. So we want to have it a little bit turned, so with R we can adjust it a little bit and then move it a little bit along the axis and position it so it's kind of that side panel we want to have. I selected here the top faces and then started extruding it up, and basically following that approach, extruding, scaling, grabbing it a little bit to put it to follow the rest of the roof, and also rotating it a little bit. You might want to add some loop cuts in the middle just to give it a little bit of variation in the middle. And here it's also nice if you have a ground plane, so that's, I just created a ground plane to see which faces at the bottom I can, for example, delete completely because we won't see them. And then also you can move some of those faces up. So here I'm again selecting one of the edges or vertices, doesn't matter. I'm pressing G twice just to move it up so it's kind of aligning with the ground. Doesn't have to be very precise, but just to get it out of the way. And now we can just further extrude the top part. So here I'm just extruding again, scaling, extruding, grabbing, rotating, just to get that position. And what I'm trying to do here is getting that kind of Viking look. So you might have seen it on pictures or something, to have that kind of on top of the houses. And then in the end I can just duplicate it once to have it also on the other side. And because of course they're like on the same level, so one of them, the top part, I'm just gonna move a little bit on the y-axis and also rotate it a little bit so they're kind of not going through each other and it looks like one is going behind the other. If you want, you can turn on cavity in the displaying settings, and then also shade object smooth and put on the auto smooth, so it kind of gives you a really nice look. And if you do that for all the object, I think it already looks quite nice. In the end, we can just duplicate those wooden parts also for the back. So you can duplicate and rotate it, and then maybe you have to move it a little bit around. So we're just gonna hide that for a second to create the window. So back into edit mode, you can use the knife tool. And if you want to apply the knife tool changes, you can just press enter to kind of create this small window. And I'm using the knife tool here because I want it to be like a little bit rotated and a little bit stylized more. So with that now, we can create another cube, and this is going to be a really small one. This is kind of the one where we're going to create the surrounding of the chimney and the back window. So we can just hide every other part so we can work on that small one. So we can scale it, and then in edit mode, we just want to kind of extrude it so we have in the end 4 kind of wooden pieces that are surrounding it. So what I'm doing here is I'm gonna bevel off the edges. For such a small object, you might consider not doing that, but I think it gives it a nice look. Maybe not necessary, but yeah, it could be nice. Okay, so we can unhide the rest of the house again, and then just move that a little bit in front of the house, because now we can see kind of the house as a reference and know how big we actually have to make that wooden part. And as I mentioned, we want to have 4 of these wooden parts, so we can just duplicate them with Shift D and then rotate them for 90 degrees. In the beginning I put them together like that. I didn't like the look because I want to have them more like a square in total. So then I started moving and scaling them a little bit around so the total shape was more like a square. When that was done, I was using the knife tool to kind of create some small cracks in there. So just with the knife and then moving one of the vertices more inside, and I did that just on 2 sides, so it gives it a nice variation there. Now that we have the shape ready, we can go in top view and then grab it to move it underneath the chimney opening that we have in our roof, and then in front view or maybe even side view might be better here to move it up. And then you might also have to scale it a little bit more to have the right size here. I also change to wireframe to see if it's right positioned. And then I basically just duplicated it for the back window. And for the duplicate, I also rotated it around the x-axis 90 degrees. And then I basically just had to move it over to the back. If you press Control and then 1, you can kind of see the object from the back, and then you can grab and rotate it to have the exact place where you want. I also wanted to have a wooden part on the back, so I duplicated the front wooden parts and rotated them around the z-axis 180 degrees, And then in edit mode, I just deleted the two bottom parts and just used the top part and kind of positioned that on the wall we have as a kind of extra wooden part. And I just had to scale it a little bit on the x-axis to have it the right width of the house. Next, I wanted to have some more small wooden parts. So again, here I used the front part and duplicated one of them and then separated it. Here also started renaming the parts again because it kind of gets a lot of objects. And then in front view, the new part we just created, we can move aside and then rotate it and bring it in the right position, same like the big parts. But now here in the side view, we're gonna move it like more in the middle. So what I did here is I just removed one of the edge loops in the middle because they were not necessary for such a small wooden part, and then I kind of moved it so those small wooden parts I want to have about the same size like the wall we have. And again here we can delete the bottom faces of that small part because it's going to be under the ground plane, and then we can also move the ones up so they're aligning better with the ground plane, so we're basically not wasting any faces that we anyway won't see. Yeah, so this is basically ready, so we can just go ahead and then duplicate it again to have like kind of two of those small ones, and now you can kind of consider to change one of them so they have a slight variation and they don't exactly look alike. Now in edit mode, I duplicated them again and then rotated them around the z-axis 180 degrees. And now here I just wanted to add some small cracks and stuff that is giving them a little bit more detail. And I did the same approach, so I used the knife tool here again and then just moved the middle one, the kind of middle edge, a little bit inside, so you have those kind of small cracks, and same for the other side. And here, you know, you can just to give them a little bit variation because you do not want to have them all look the same way, so you just move around a few of those edge loops, add some cracks, and that will be enough to kind of make it look a little bit different than the others. With this, we actually have the main part of the house already ready, so the next part we're gonna work on is the door. So we can create another cube again and follow the same procedure. So we're gonna move it up on the z-axis, then move it up front and scale it a little bit on the y-axis so it's thinner. And then in front view, we can scale it to the right size and move it in front of the door frame so we can kind of see how big we want to make it. Then I added two loop cuts from the front. These are kind of going to be the separators for the plank, and I moved the top middle face a little bit up so it has kind of this small curve or something. Same, I moved the left and right top edges a little bit down, and then in the total I wanted to have the door a little bit smaller than the actual space for the door frame, but we're still going to work on that a little bit later. So the three faces on the bottom I also wanted to move a little bit up so they're kind of not standing on the ground. And then the middle loop cuts that we added, we can bevel them and we can do two segments. So we have like one loop cut in the middle of one edge. And now if we scale that, it is kind of like pretending, so we have now 3 planks. Now I just added 2 more loop cuts for the middle. This is just to, you know, give the planks a little bit more variation so they're not completely straight, and you can just scale those ones a little bit and then move them around so you have a kind of more wooden door. Okay, in top view, we can basically just position the door in a door frame, and now it's just a position scaling so it kind of looks right to you. So while still in edit mode, we're going to create another cube. This is going to be for more detail, and what I'm doing here is just moving it up on the z-axis and then moving it on the y-axis, and here just scaling it so it has about the same width of the door, and especially scaling it on the y-axis so it's a kind of wooden plank, and then just kind of bringing it into shape and then position it on the front door. So we want to have kind of 2 wooden parts that are going horizontal on the wooden door. It's kind of the 2 parts that keep it together, but I think they also add really nice detail here. And I also added a loop cut again to make them to reshape them a little bit, and then following the same approach as before to give them a crack. So I used a knife tool here and then just pushed the middle vertex a little bit inside, so we have that small crack. And I just did that for the top one. So the bottom one I just left like that, and I just added here 2 loop cuts to give that little variation, and that's basically it for the 2 front wooden parts. So now we can just select them with L, and then in side view we can just move them back. So after we know that those back faces are going to be attached to the door, we can just delete them before actually moving them, because no one is going to see them, and that saves us a few faces. And what our small door is still missing is a door handle. So for this, in object mode, I created a new torus, changed a little bit the size, and then in edit mode, I just selected the 2 top rings and then used inset. Inset, you have 2 things, the thickness and the depth. And here, keep the thickness at 0 and just change the depth to kind of make it a little bit more thicker. And then scale it down so it has the right size. And I accidentally moved it in object mode, so that's why the origin was in the middle and not with the 3D cursor. So I used the set origin and then 2 3D cursor to kind of fix that problem. And then in edit mode, I started moving it around. Now the origin is not a huge problem, but I generally like to have them all at the center of the world, unless there's a specific reason it should not be there. And also for the door handle, there are 2 faces that are going to be attached to the door. So there's one I removed, and then I just position it at the door. In the end, I also rotated it a little bit on the y-axis, giving it this little kind of small detail that not everything is exactly straight and the way we would expect it. And then in the end, I selected the door and the door handle to just rotate it a little bit to kind of open up the door. And it's nice to do that with the handle also, so you can select both with shift and then go into edit mode, because you don't have to rotate them separately and place them separately. So now with the door, it's kind of, I don't know, giving it some small detail here, which is also, there's small details I think make things really nice. And then also for those 2 objects, we want to use the shade smooth again, and with the auto smooth, just to make it look nicer. And the last object that is missing is the pole in front of the door. Here I used a cylinder. You could also use a cube again, but just to have a little bit difference, we're going to use a cylinder. And basically following the same approach, so moving it up on the Z axis, moving it in front of the door, and then scaling it just on the X and Y axis to get it thinner, adding 2 loop cuts, which we can again, scale a little bit, rotate, grab, so we don't have that completely straight pole. And especially for stylized looks, for those kind of poles, you want to have the ends of it a little bit thicker, and then the middle part a little bit thinner. And then it's also nice, that it's not going straight down, so you want to move them a little bit in all directions and rotate them. I also deleted the bottom face again, because that's gonna be one of the faces we're not gonna see. And then in top view, I just moved it a little bit aside. Instead of top view, you can also do G and then Shift Z, so you're only moving it on the X and Y axis. Here again, we're gonna use the shade smooth on the auto smooth, and you might want to play around a little bit with the angle, so it's kind of smoothing out the one on the side of the object. And then we're going to create another cylinder. We're going to follow the same approach, but this one we're going to scale really, really thin, because this is going to be the rope. Then we can rotate it on the x-axis 9 degrees, and in top view we can place it. So this is going to be the connection rope between the house and the pole, and then also move it up so it has the kind of right size or height actually. You can hide all the rest and then delete the one face that is kind of pointing towards the house. We won't need that. And then back in edit mode, we can select the last edge ring and then extend it so it's kind of like, or extruded, so it's pointing inwards the house. I also deleted the other face because that's kind of the pointing inwards in the pole. And then I added a few loop cuts, so with proportional editing enabled, we can just move the outer ring and the other ones are kind of moving slightly with it, and this is going to give that kind of sweet curve that we want to pretend this is going to be a rope. I also wanted to have it a little bit thinner, but after I rotate it already, I just scaled all the single edge loops. Luckily there were not that many, because otherwise it might kind of scale strangely. And then in edit mode, I added another torus where I just changed the amount of faces a little bit because we don't need that much. This is kind of gonna be the rope that is kind of winded around the pole. So this part I just placed over the pole and then rotated it and scaled it until it had the right size, so it was kind of going around the pole and was kind of looking like a rope. I also duplicated it, and that one I also rotated and then moved it a little bit aside, so it's kind of like that second part of the rope that's kind of, so the rope is going around it twice. And then back into object mode, we have that one rope object that we can also shade smooth, so it's looking like nice and smooth. And with this we finished the modeling of the Viking house, so congratulations if you made it till here. And on a little side note, because I know that especially the keyboard shortcuts in Blender can be super confusing if you start off and you see a video, and I mean, I know it myself, I just, you just start pressing a lot of keyboard shortcuts and it's really hard to describe all of them. So I created a Android app which kind of contains all, or I hope most of them. So basically what I did, I listed up all the keyboard shortcuts, added some descriptions. For some of them I also added some pictures to kind of explain it. And there's also the option to show the Mac keys, so depending on what operating system you use, you can switch that. And you can download the app for free, but the free version contains some ads. So after I don't like ads that much, I try to add them in a nice way. So basically you can unlock some of those sections with the keyboard shortcuts, and you can either unlock them by watching a video or just buying the full version. I will add the link to the app in the video description, so if you want to try it, I would be really happy about that. And if you think there's some feature, something missing that you would really like to have, just let me know and I can add it. And anyways, I hope you like this video, and then I'll see you in the next one.